one. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Valentine's Day Social Housing Roundtable today. My name is Matthew Baird. To those who I've not met or engaged with, there's a lot of familiar faces here, which is lovely. I am the founder of Baird & Co Recruitment, which is a specialist social housing recruitment business. I've been doing that for 2 years officially tomorrow. So it's the anniversary of that tomorrow, but I've been doing social housing recruitment for 11 years now. And during lockdowns, all that time ago, that really doesn't feel that long ago, we started doing some of these roundtables to try and bring the social housing community together so that there's actually a voice for people to come together, have some really good conversations, but also create change. And particularly over kind of 2022, these have just grown into this and more that we're doing now. I'm really, really proud of where they've come. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've had a huge amount of people join us already this year, and more people registering all the time. Now, last year I ran an event with Ben Jenkins, who's with me today, because the one thing I always want to make sure we have from these is a diverse group of speakers. It's one of the things I'm most happy about with these. I don't mind if you are a housing officer, support worker, or if you're the director and owner of the business. None of those matter to me. What matters is that you're coming along to share ideas, share best practice, and want to get involved. So that's where this has come from. And Ben was somebody who is very active on LinkedIn. I've noticed him when we got talking via his view of the tenant experience, I guess, from being in social housing. And that I always like to put the caveat at the beginning: this is never a bashing of any one housing provider or anything along those lines. And Ben is obviously just one tenant, but he speaks to an awful lot of them, and engages with an awful lot of the opposing view that sometimes we don't hear enough of. And despite having things like the white paper and stuff that have come through, I don't think we've had all the change we necessarily hoped for. But we'll come on to that shortly. So Ben, without further ado, I'm going to go and deal with a couple of admin people who are struggling to get into the room. So I'm going to go and deal with those, and I'll pass over to you to your kind of introductions, and I guess introduce the topic for today. If anyone does have questions at any time, please use the chat or use the raise hand function, and I will bring you in. But Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. I just share my screen. We press play. Okay, can everyone see that? I'm assuming so. Brilliant. Right, okay, so thank you very much indeed for that, Matt. I have got a quick agenda. The main points I'm going to go through as quick as I can so we can get on to the question and answers, because that's where I'm going to learn the most, and I can answer your questions and we can exchange information there. So a quick look at the introduction, the story so far, the steps we've taken. I'll give you an overview of the website that we've created, what happened when we launched this website, some of the complaints and issues that we've helped to solve and still open. Then the inevitable happens, and then we'll look at the future, and then we'll say we'll move on to question and answers. So the first thing for me is, who is Ben Jenkins? Well, I'm a resident of Green Square Accord, and I have been since I moved in when I was 40, which is 8 years ago. And I'm a good neighbour, so I instantly make friends with people and look after them and support them. And I started to raise issues with Green Square Accord back in 2016. Out of frustration, when these complaints and issues were ignored and communication bans were used, I set up a website called Green Square Accord Residents. And if you like, the housing sector website is the son of that. So when the Green Square Accord Residents website was up and running, we were getting lots of other frustrated residents, especially from Green Square Accord. But I was getting other residents from outside of Green Square Accord saying, "Are you doing this? Can you help me with my housing association?" And at that point, I sort of said, "No, I can't." But then I thought, well, why aren't I doing this? So we created the housing sector website, which offers a service to residents of other housing associations, not just Green Square Accord. Now, there was clear quite early on that there was a gap in the market. And I say it's not just Green Square Accord. There's frustration with people reporting issues, and lots of issues that get reported are closed before they're resolved. There's time constraints, they're not dealt with within the timeframes that are offered. Complaints are often pushed to one side, not acted upon. The Housing Ombudsman did a great thing. They made it a lot easier for people to report issues to the Housing Ombudsman, but a bit like me, with their naivety, they didn't realise how many complaints they were going to get, which has caused a backlog. I'm currently waiting 18 months. I've got a call booked in for this week to discuss something that I raised 18 months ago. So there's some frustrations around there, and there needs to be a middle ground perhaps between that and the Housing Ombudsman. The Information Commissioner's Office, They tend to issue a little slap on the wrist, but when you've had your data breached and you've had it shared with other people, there doesn't seem to be any repercussions for the housing association. And MPs, some MPs are great and offer loads of support, and others just don't want to get involved. And the main focus is everyone seems to be focused on reputation management, with Green Square Accord actually employing their own in-house animation team and a voiceover artist under the guise of a communications director to make these lovely little videos that tell everyone how great they're doing. And that's not quite the view of the housing association people. So we've got a sector that wants to be transparent, and we've got residents that want to be heard. So we're all moving in the same direction with the same goal. So I registered the website, housingsector.co.uk, .org.uk and .com. So we've got it covered on all bases. And I created a company. So the website eventually will provide a one-stop shop for us all, and a company name so we can start funding this project and start driving some revenue streams. So far, we have an online directory of about 150, well, it's 156 associations. I just did a count up after writing this. So we've got 156 on there. And I've driven traffic from social media. So you'll see me actively on LinkedIn pushing things, Twitter and Facebook. It's not hard to find upset residents. So they're all out there, and they're not all in the right, I found a lot of very angry residents who seem to want the moon on a stick, or they want to be reimbursed, 20 grand a year for the last 20 years. It's, ridiculous stuff. And I've had to put up a lot of abuse for some residents as well. So it's given me an insight into some of the issues that the housing associations have to deal with when trying to appease residents. But I've had some great offers of support from the sector. This has been brilliant. I've had some great conversations. And usually when people say, oh, a question I get asked all the time isn't true. But let me tell you, a question I get asked a lot is, Ben, why did you want to get involved in the housing sector? And my answer is always, I didn't. I did not want to get involved in the housing sector. This wasn't something that I had an interest in doing. However, due to my issues with Green Square Accord and uncovering a lot of the dirt that was there, and a lot of shortfallings within the sector, I've decided that actually there is a gap in the market here and I can. So if you're looking for anyone to blame, it's old Ruth Cook at Green Square Accord. Okay, a quick overview of the website. You can use the QR code there so you can have a look at it on your phones now. It's a simple landing page which offers support for residents and for housing providers. And I'll go through some of those pages for you now. There's a directory listing. So the ones that we've got are alphabetical. You can click on them. I have chosen Bromford just because they happen to be in the Bs. It's nothing to do with Bromford. Actually, Bromford were really good. They were a little bit slow out the gate, but once they got involved in the process, they helped close a complaint. So they're really good. We list information. You've got links here for the CEO, the website, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I create a little blog, which is taken from website, LinkedIn, information regarding that. You can look at the reported issues and complaints that they've had via our website. The second half of this page gives the strapline judgments, their governance, viability, and it lists the housing ombudsman. So it's all there, all transparent, all nice and easy for someone to easily find. When someone reports an issue, it gets put here. The map is just a postcode that you can zoom in, so it gives an idea of whereabouts geographically the issue is. It gives an issue, the issue and the exchange of emails that have gone through. The way that people report the issues is through an online form. I've just shown you half of it here. There's more of it comes underneath. But important bits are that you've got the housing association information, so you know where the housing information, who it is, an overview of the complaint, and that will be from emails, from information that's been provided in the consent box. We've got the consent there. We've had some associations push back and go, well, you haven't got consent to act on. We do provide a consent agreement within the form. Most of the housing associations that we've worked with have gone, actually, okay, some have pushed back. Some have gone, no, you haven't got consent. You'll need to get them to write a letter and post it into us. If your customers are coming to me, it's because they haven't been able to get through to you. Making them jump through extra hoops might not be the best course of action. We've got consent there. If you need us to do anything else to gain consent from yourselves, we'll gladly take that on board. Once this form is completed, an email is sent to the customer service team. Depending on the situation, we may also copy in the CEO and we may also copy in the MP. For data protection, we only we publish redacted versions of the information, so none of their personal information is on the website. We do share it with the Housing Association, again with that consent given. And once the issue has been closed, we delete all of the information that's personal, all the emails. What we do is we keep the postcode and the issue. So if it's HP22 and damp, we keep that logged. So later on, we can build the data, and we've got some effective reporting that we'll be able to pull out once we've got enough data in there. Oh, where's my cursor? Right, we say run surveys. I'm due to publish one that we've got, so I've got some results to write up. And at the minute, I've started using, so we've registered you from a housing association or your housing resident to see how different, the difference of opinion there. We do get some housing association staff that put everything is brilliant. They tend to come from the same IP address. So if your job is that brilliant and you're doing such a great job, why you would not want to stay there and not move on and take these skills somewhere else. We do get on the upside some very angry residents, again, who post multiple I strongly disagree, it's rubbish, it's rubbish, it's rubbish. So we tend to filter out some of those if we can. If it's clear that it is from the same IP address, then we'll filter that out to try and get an honest and overview spread. This one we ran in December, broke down into 5 different things. I've highlighted some of them here. But you can see straight away the darker blue ones are from the people that work within the sector, and the lighter blue ones are residents. So there is quite often a difference of opinion in where we're performing and where the strengths are. Okay, so we did a soft launch, but it landed quite hard. So late October we launched it, and complaints came flooding in. The SEO, now the SEO which I've got here, search engine optimization, works in my favor because I've got lots of housing association names on there. I've got information from the housing ombudsman. So it's coming up, and then we've just started to, it takes a little time for this information to pull through. But over the last 6 to 7 weeks, we started to get information from where we've been found on search engines. This is people finding us through Yahoo and Google. So it's good to see that we're starting to rank quite high on there. The sector response, I say I've had lots of calls from people, CEOs, people within the sector at all levels, and it's been great. And there's lots of interest, there's an appetite. Once there is some concern initially, once you speak to me, then okay, we see what you're doing. And it's not a combative relationship. We really are in this together, and we really need to work together to help fix some of these solutions, find some of these solutions. But it keeps growing. This is the good thing. It keeps growing. So a quick look at some of the complaints we closed. We had falling roof tiles, which was obviously a risk to life as it was falling on a pedestrian path. We had some poor guy who had just plastic on top of his roof with hardly any tiles on it at all. We've got that fixed. A lady had her damp wooden floor replaced. We've had a front door secured, so now people can secure the front door. We had an issue with raw sewage pumping into a lady's flat and into a shared communal area. We've had issues with service charge, people not being notified of service charges. Some of the ones we've still got open are numerous damp issues, which, you know, we all know is an ongoing issue. Security concerns is a big one, and many for Clarion. Clarion just seem to take it and then ignore it. One of the most alarming ones has come from a Birmingham residential home with 10 flats for vulnerable residents, with blocked fire exits, no fire alarms, kitchen issues, some of the flats not able to hear the fire alarm when it sounded. Birmingham City Council have got involved, and they've made a list of recommendations that need to happen. The worrying thing that we discovered there is that Birmingham City Council admitted that they don't have a team ready to enforce these changes, and we have the service provider who is stalling for time rather than going, actually, this has been going on too long, we need to fix this. And some of those service charge issues where people have been charged an increased cost and not told about it, a lot of those are still open as well, waiting for an apology or an acceptance. But on the whole, we're getting a nice mixture of complaints, and we're helping to resolve some. So the inevitable. Now, working 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and holding down a full-time job, I'm hearing horror stories, and from residents and from staff. I've quite a few insiders, certainly within the sector, who retell some really horrific stories about attitudes and cultures. But yeah, hearing some of the horror stories from residents was exhausting. So due to exhaustion, I've taken the last 4 weeks, I've had a little break. I haven't switched on my Mac apart from to update a playlist. I haven't switched on a laptop. I've turned off notifications from emails. I have responded to a few saying I'm taking a little break. I will be back in February, and it's been a much needed rest. Now, whilst I've been taking that break, the website kept growing, which was great. Offers of support and appreciation. So, people want to help. People who are in a position to help can. It's brilliant. And I've come back now with a rested and renewed determination to get going again. Okay, so where's the future for us? Okay, well, according to government records, there are about 16,000 housing associations. So I've listed less than 10%. So we need to grow our directory. And now we're getting emails from housing associations asking to be listed, which is brilliant. My wife, who is the brains and the beauty of Team Genco, is busy doing some courses and some training. Once she's finished, she's going to help build this directory out so we can continue to grow the directory and get more people on board. Once we've done that, we're going to create a review platform. So it gives residents a chance to review. Employees can provide feedback. We can factor in ongoing issues and resolution times. There are other factors that we might consider, such as the ratio of the amount of housing stock to the amount of complaints. So there might be other factors that we link into that yet, but a review platform is certainly in the pipeline. We're going to offer a membership out to housing associations. This is so they can manage their own listing. So we've got a point of contact. So when a complaint comes through, we've got someone that we can go directly to. So the issue's there. They'll be able to manage the reviews, promote achievements, and they can use the recruitment portal as well. Because we've got that SEO, we've got that platform, people are starting to find us, on the front page of Google and Yahoo. So we can help to land a lot of the issues. Tailored training. So look, when we know that if there's an issue with Mavis in the call center because she can't pass on the complaints, this is something that we can then write a bespoke training package and feedback that has been gained, and we can start to implement that so we can all learn and move forward. We can offer a triage service to some of the up and coming housing associations. There's a lot of mum and pups organisations out there who don't have the staff or the manpower. Well, actually, we can offer a sort of first line support there in handling their issues that are coming reported. Further down the line, I'm looking at perhaps, I don't know yet, I've put it on there because I think it probably will go this way. We'll set up a union for residents so they've got some form of protection. I don't know, maybe we'll charge them £2 a month and we can provide them with support, we can help maintain their home, we can provide them with how-to guides, letter templates, etc. It's that support them dealing with their housing association, because again, the reason we've set up this website is so many residents don't have the time, the inclination, or determination in some way to go through the rigmarole of reporting an issue, chasing it, escalating it to a complaint, dealing with the housing ombudsman. It's a long path. And when you've got the school run to do, you've got nan to look after, they don't always have the time. So we can support them there. Now, look, the ego has landed. Look, I'm not claiming to have all the answers. I don't stand before you now and say, look, I'm going to set this website up in 18 months' time. There'll never be another Grenfell. We're never going to have kids dying of mold. I'm not going to fix it for you. At the end of the day, I'll be honest, I'm a barrow boy. You put me in front of people and I sell my wares. I'm the son of an antiques dealer. This is in my blood, right? You're the ones that can help fix it, but together, right? I've had great conversations with tech providers. There is some great tech coming along. If you don't believe me, go and dust off your abacus and do it that way. But there's some great tech, internet things that are evolving. This website can be a platform for that. Tech guys are great at building tech stuff, but they're not so good with perhaps connecting with their audience. Well, if the website's up and running and we've got that, we can be the platform to help launch these new tech within the sector. Specialists within the sector. Now, I'm not claiming to be a recruitment or a training specialist, and why would I do that? We've got specialists. My bromance with Matt continues. He's a recruitment specialist. So there are people there, but again, with the website having the SEO and driving it through, it could be that page where people come looking for a job within the sector and we can train them. We can take that training again. A platform that provides a voice to your residents. They're not coming to me because they've got some free time. They're coming to me because they don't feel like they're being heard and they want some help to amplify that. Well, we're going to do that. Look, we need to be open and honest. We need to share best practices. We need to celebrate the wins and learn from our mistakes. And that's all I'm here to do, is to work with you. Early adopters can help shape this as well. So get on board early, come and talk to me, email me, I'll provide you all the links, help to shape it. you know, if one CEO has already told me I was going to make a list of CEO wages, and she went, no, Ben, you're just opening a can of worms. And when it was explained to me why that wouldn't be a good idea and how there were lots of factors that I wouldn't be aware of to start going, share that. You know what? You're right. We won't do that. So it's
I mean, that
it's
comes
good to
out
hear.
on Inside Housing, do it every year anyway. So that data is easy then to share.
I was going to do some math on the ratio of houses to that, the complaints they have open, and the housing ombudsman. So I was going to pull in lots of other data to amplify that message. But any early adapters are here to shape it. So, as I promised, I've flown through that as quick as I can, so I can answer your questions and we can have a discussion.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's I know some of that was kind of a bit of a background of you and where the idea for the housing sector side of things has come from. I'm close it down so I can kind of see everyone in the room, so I can see hands being raised and things like that. And obviously we can share your details if anybody did miss those. A couple of points that have come into the chat. As I say, if anyone has got any conversations, please either use the chat function or still, if you're happy to, raise your hand and I will bring you into the conversation and we can get kind of a flow running. There's something that came up very early on then from Anna Henderson. And I think this is where I was wanting our conversation. I know it's where our conversation went a little bit last time. We wanted to kind of follow up on that from. What you've built there is excellent. And I think there needs to be more and more, I know we've talked about this before, accountability in social housing and actually having a central place where people could go and make a complaint. As you say, some people really struggle with different forms. And I think if you have got something like you've got running there, whilst it's great, evidently have a look at, you know, other ways for people to get in touch. And I know you're going to look at those. But as Anna has put in the chat, do you feel that some of the role you have taken on is as a result of cuts to other services such as CAB, which would have at one time offered similar support?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, you know, we've still got the hangover of lockdown, the funding that. Cost of living is increasing, wages aren't increasing. So yeah, there's difficulties all over the place. So yeah, there are gaps, and yeah, one of those is due to a lack of funding for many support platforms.
I feel that, and I don't know whether you agree, I think we need to kind of, to me at any rate, and I know we've discussed this before as well, with some businesses, kind of the ethos of what they are as a company has kind of gone. They've gone from being, and I think this is partly due to pressure from a huge lack of central government for building new stock. I mean, this is where a lot of this is kind of rolled on from, but there's so much focus on new development than looking after existing stock that actually then you're finding when people are being employed, and it wasn't so long ago, actually, one of the large housing providers, they had a vacancy for a senior executive in the business. I think it might have even been chief exec. And they hired somebody from a financial institution that's never worked in social housing before. Yeah. And it's those kind of things that go, what does that tell you about the mindset of what this was? Because traditionally, social housing was something everybody wanted because it was good quality, affordable accommodation, and that's what it's meant to be.
Well, if I may with that one, it's now about mergers. As I said on the last time we were together, I said the sector was very much like a Ponzi scheme in the fact that it creates money from building new builds to support the dilapidated stock which is coming up. So new builds is very much and that's what MPs need. So they make this Faustian pact. Let's make this deal with these people, even though they're getting complaints and the housing ombudsman aren't happy with them, they're going to build these homes, and that gives us some tick on our tick box. Our own CEO, Ruth Cook, is a financial officer, and she was brought in specifically to create the merger between Green Square and Accord. So that's happened. She secured all the financing. Now we actually need a CEO who's going to be focused on dealing with the customers, with the residents, and putting the heart back into the organisation. And that's what's missing. And so many people from within inside the sector say, you know, we were this great little housing association. We were able to manage our staff. We managed to over our homes. We looked after. We had this feeling of community. Now we're being with nationwide, you know, call centres who don't have that community involvement, who don't have that engagement, and that has damaged.
I unfortunately agree, and I've talked on these before many times about actually patch sizes being too large. Carolyn Mann put in the chat, advocacy for residents should be funded by local authority. I understand, but it is not easy to find out who delivers it, and I think having something like your platform helps in that. But I'm going to bring in Joe Simcox. Joe, nice to see you. It's been a little while since we last caught up, so nice to see you, and do come in.
Hi Ben, hi Matt. So first of all, Ben, as you know, we've spoken over LinkedIn many a time, and it's as someone who is quite prolific in the housing world, but also as a customer myself within the housing world. I see it from both sides, and it's just interested on your viewpoint. And one of my colleagues from community housing, our head of customer engagement, will be interested in this as well. Is how do you see, in terms with what you're trying to do, working with the importance of customer voice and customer engagement through what you're trying to, or what I think fantastic, and what you're trying to achieve in working with our organisations as well. What's your viewpoint?
There can't be enough support in there, and if the way through to get the voice heard is through a customer engagement panel, the voice of the customer, whatever they label it within that association, then we'll work with them, and there's no reason why we wouldn't. I mean, we want to work with everyone within there that's here to help a hand, you know. And I think I was part of the customer panel, and I'll be honest with you, sorry, my cats are just going mad now. It felt like a tick box exercise, if I'm honest. And when I sort of raised this as a concern, I was promptly sacked from a customer panel, which you have to go some to be sacked from a voluntary position, but there you go. And they've relaunched one, and now there's wages involved. I think it's great. I have, there was Scrutiny Steve on Twitter, who was very much a voice of the customer, bless his little heart. And I had lots of Twitter exchanges with him, and I had a few phone calls with him. And he was a lovely guy, but he was just exhausted by it all. He didn't feel like he was being supported by his housing association, and he was getting the abuse from residents. So the poor guy just went, you know what? And he's taken down his Twitter account, and he's having a break. So yeah, it's not a one-stop fix. Customer engagement, voice of the customer, they're all there. You know, if that's the way to get the message through. But the crux of it is you've got people reporting issues, and they're not getting past that customer service desk, or their issues aren't being raised to the service team. And when the building maintenance team are getting out there, they haven't got the right stuff, and it's delays and delays. And then when they raise a complaint, the complaint isn't being raised. It's not being listened to. So I think as great as these customer experiences are, these engagement scenes, this voice of engagement, I think it's a little bit too in bed. I'm not in bed with anyone apart from Mrs. Jenkins. You know, I'll put it out there. Let's put it out there. Let's put our dirty laundry in public and wash it. If it's on my website, it's there. You've got a certain amount of time to deal with it, and we'll respond. And when you do, we'll sing your praises. And if you don't, we'll just keep reminding you that this is still open and it's still on there. And once we've got that review platform in place, that could become detrimental to your standing within the website on the review platform.
As a follow-up to Joe's question, actually, I mean, to anybody who was here 2 weeks ago, there wasn't a roundtable last week, but we did one 2 weeks ago. We ran one on, it was with Emily Orme, who is a big advocate for actually a lot of what you're talking about. And the title of that was Tenant Engagement versus Tenant Influence. And you mentioned the word kind of tick box there. And I think a lot of businesses look at tenant engagement as either a reaction to the white paper, or, oh, we've always done it, we're always engaging with tenants. And two of the things that really came out of that was, the first one was why. And I think what you've mentioned there is apt. So, well, why do they have this tenant panel with you if actually nothing was going to change? Because when you called them out, nothing changed. But the other side is the influence of those discussions. And then you've mentioned there, and I know you and I have talked about the complaints procedure and how in a lot of businesses it doesn't work. What I find interesting is the fact that people don't realize that is an opportunity for influence. Because if you come out of that experience with a positive experience from your complaint, the conversations you have with other residents, etc., then will have a positive influence in terms of the narrative around the housing provider. But also, you will feel engaged as a customer, and that is your engagement, because that is the time you're choosing to engage. Somebody came on last time and said, actually, as a tenant, I'm not interested in engaging with my housing provider. What I want is just a place to live, and if it falls apart, I want it fixed. And that's all I want. But that is still, it got to the stage there where they were then frustrated with the housing provider, and they wouldn't engage with them, because every time that they had tried to engage through a complaint or other methods, it was just ignored. So they'd given up on their housing provider. And I think that's an interesting balance to have.
It is, and I've used this expression. It's a war of attrition with a lot of them, because, and this goes for, I've got a WhatsApp group for all my, I own a block of 43 flats. I created a WhatsApp group, and people report issues through me because they know that I'll keep on doing it, I'll keep on going. And they just can't be bothered, and I don't blame them. You know, it's a long, hard thing. It's a war of attrition. Back to the part about having influence. the audience has changed. So as before, we were social housing providers and we were social housing tenants. I'm a shared ownership. So the money that we invest in this flat is part of my end of life care, if you like. It's going to be my retirement. It's going to be, you know, God forbid, hospital treatment for whatever. So actually, I'm a shareholder, so I should have influence. And when I call for the likes of, say, look, Rivka, you've done a great job with the merger and securing financing. Now we need a customer service focus to bring all the good stuff to life that you've built the foundations for financially. We should have a say in that. We are shareholders. You know, I own as much as this, you know, this flat. So if the outside, if the lift isn't working, if there's graffiti, if it's not safe, actually reducing the value of my property, which is going to impact on my retirement and my end of life care. Hopefully we can sell up and go traveling around the world in our camper van, you know, that's the plan.
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you mean there. There's a comment, a thing in the chat that I'm going to come to Nigel, and then there's a really interesting question by Anna actually that I want to make sure we explore. But Carolyn Mann, the customer voice is only worthwhile if actions result from things customers are saying, and that is viable in every single sector, but it does get lost in social housing. Nigel, great to have you with us. Do come in.
Oh, thanks, Matthew. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
Nice to see you. Look, this is a great initiative. You know, well done. To be honest, Ben, I think you're going to get scaling up issues, partly from resources going forward. It's a great initiative. But like what I want to do is just bring it in context here with what this new social housing bill is about, right? There are three specific objectives. The first is to rebalance the relationship between the social housing landlord and the residents, right? So, Matthew, you point about engagement, which you had in your previous session. This is no longer tick boxing when this bill is actually coming through, and it will be shortly.
Yeah, I think it goes live in March, doesn't it?
It does.
March, April time. It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
Well, I know what's going on with it because I'm part of that group now. So, but this is really important. So it's going from the tick boxy to real engagement. So it kind of parallels with what you're doing. It has to no longer be tick boxing. It has to be proper engagement. And the whole of that is a rebalancing of the resident and the accountability of the landlord with the resident. The second objective is to ensure that the private, this is the emphasis is on private here. There's a large chunk of private, disproportionate amount of private providers are well financed and well governed. The third objective is that the regulator, this is the really important point here in these two measures, the regulator is going to be the go-between the Parliament and the landlords. So the regulator is going to have the power to make sure the first two objectives are met. Now, with clear accountability between the Parliament and the regulator. Now, whilst in principle that sounds great, the regulator, the people involved, have absolutely no ground experience whatsoever. And I know this firsthand because I'm involved with them now. So their understanding of how these policies, these bills, these all these objectives are going to be delivered, they have no clue whatsoever. So that in itself, operationally in this bill, is going to be a very, very difficult transition, how this bill is going to be implemented and regulated by people who are absolutely, I shouldn't say no clue, but have no experience of what it means to be on the ground. So I wish you well with this initiative, Ben. It's great. But just realize the context of this. It's good timing, but operationally, how this will pan out, I don't know. It's kind of, it's going to be
an interesting one because Nigel, when I was at the West Midlands Social Housing, West Midlands Supported Housing Conference end of last year, the regulator was there on one of the panels. And actually what was very clear, and it's the only second time I've really seen it in person, and the first time was when I met Eddie Hughes, again at a different conference at the time, was Minister for Housing. And every answer was so careful, and what was very clear was she was saying, we'd love to do more, but we can't, was basically almost like they had their own hands tied with what they could do as a regulator. It was mad. So it's really, when you mentioned there about them being the go-between with the two, how much power they're actually going to have could be really interesting.
Well, we're working on it, but the thing is this: I think it's moving in the right direction. We've all been singing the same tune that Ben's been, but how it's going to deploy operationally is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a bit of a Wild West. So the second thing I just want to quickly mention: there's a resident and tenant engagement conference coming up in London in May. So hopefully there'll be some further dialogue about what's going on here. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Ben.
No, thank you. And that's a really interesting idea to share. And the fact that we're having a resident engagement conference tells you, I think, everything about the state of the sector at the moment. I'm sure Ben would agree.
I do agree. And just to come back to some of Nigel's points there, shared stats are brilliant. We've got some associations that are sharing them already, which is great. But the bits that they're sharing, it's the numbers that they're not sharing, which are more interesting. So they're saying, for example, you know, and I'm making up figures because I don't have the data in front of me, but, you know, we've answered 60% of our calls within 4 minutes. Well, how long were the other calls waiting? You know, we've dealt with our emails within, 20% of our emails within 24 hours. Well, what was the time frame on the rest of them? So they're publishing some, but it's that the flavor behind that data we need. The regulatory, I agree with you, it's going to be problematic. And again, we have to remember that the government is in bed with housing associations because of the need for new homes. So that makes it difficult. Scaling, look, I mean, I'm here today. If there is anyone, we're looking for board members, we're looking for people within the sector, you know, come to me, get involved. Let's do this. And when we start making some money, we can start to pay ourselves wages. But yeah, I am looking for funding, I am looking for people, and I am looking for people within the sector to come and work with us. So please bear that in mind.
One thing actually you mentioned there is really interesting. So anyone, again, who's been on some of the previous roundtables, Lara Oya-Daly, who's the current president of the CIH, is forever talking at the moment about the 2%. It's exactly what you mentioned there. When you go to a board and say, well, we're 98% compliant with X, Y, Z, and it's like, well, that's fine, but what about the 2? How bad is that 2? Why is that 2 failing? Because that 2%, if you've got 1,000 homes, that 2% is not a small amount of homes. And if all of those got horrendous damp and mold issues or whatever they've got, it just takes one and something tragic happens. And it's you can go, well, there's only 0.1% of our stock, so it doesn't matter one of your tenants died. Like that is, it doesn't matter when you stop thinking about it in that way. A couple of things from the chat, and then I'm going to bring in Alison. Anna Henderson, slightly devil's advocate question, and Ben, just a quick one for you to answer. Is there a risk that adding a further layer to the complaint process could cause further delays to housing associations where complaint teams are already overstretched?
Yes, but because they're overstretched doesn't mean that they shouldn't be dealing with complaints. They need to fix why they're getting complaints, but I understand that frustration. I think I've made something which is so simple. It's a simple form for the resident to fill in, and we've got that data that we can then share, and there's enough in there for that to be resolved. And again, this is why we're looking for engagement within the sector. If they come back and say, the housing coach comes back and goes, yeah, you know what, we've spoken to Mr. Lewis, this is what we're doing, then we update the report that's on there. We then go back to Mr. Lewis and say, Mr. Lewis, I hear that you're in conversations, this has been done, are you happy with that? And then we might take a back seat, as long as that's being resolved and moving in the right direction. So it is an extra layer.
Val Knight has said there, the customer voice needs to be involved at the start of the decisions, and it's actually backed up by Carolyn Mann. It says if housing associations are getting so many complaints that are not being resolved to the customer satisfaction that they're resorting to something like Ben's, that's got to be a red flag. Someone somewhere, and at least I guess there was an element there of accountability. Edith has asked Nigel, if you've got any details of the conference, could you put them in the chat? It'd be great, or I guess you can share them with me, and I can have a look for those. And Carolyn has said resident groups need to be curious and dig into those figures and challenge the data. One thing I would say back to that, Carolyn, is being on a board, sometimes you're told the data and everything going on, you're like, great, like that sounds brilliant. And it's how deep you dive without looking like, I guess, you're breaking trust. I'm going to come back to Carolyn in a second. I'm going to Alison first, and then I'm jumping over to Carolyn. Alison, please do come in.
Hi. This is going to be a version of a comment that I seem to make nearly every time we have a roundtable, but it was in the response really to Nigel's point about I think you mean the staffing at the regulator and whether what grasp they've got of housing. And there's this dichotomy that comes up all the time. Is it, if the housing sector is performing so badly, does it need shaking up by people from outside? Is the solution perhaps not with the people who've been there all along? Or is it that we should, and that's my view, that we should put more emphasis on professional training and professionalism, and see housing as a good thing to have, and not. I personally think we shouldn't be employing people from the private sector, because I know there's lots of things we weren't very good at, and but I think a lot of the problems we're having now, and I've been in the sector for 30 years of tenant involvement, frontline, bits of everything. So I think it really is about back to basics, and there's a lot of talk about innovation. I was at the Northern CIH conference in Harrogate this week, and I think I was the only person who didn't put my hand up when Ian Wright, who runs this disruption strategy thing, said, does housing need to completely like reinvent itself? I don't think it does. I think we need to start revisiting some of the stuff that we used to do really well. You know, and it's all this digital and everything, but I think just going back, and I've said it 100 times before, is, you know, housing officers out there, smaller patches, one person dealing with every aspect, none of these specialisms where nobody knows up somebody's rent account or who the support worker is. It's all in different silos, and I think that would make a big difference. And then going on to the regulator, I know they've recently advertised for quite a lot of roles, and I can't remember whether they cite housing experience as a factor, but I do know a couple of people who've got roles in there who have got lots of experience, and I don't know if that's anything tenants can do from their perspective to sort of hold the regulator to account. But then going back to my original point, is it better if the people who work for the regulator haven't got all that housing baggage and maybe a bit defensive of their previous colleagues? I haven't got an answer, but I think it's how do we ensure that the people in there have got a real deep understanding, because that it worries me about a lot of things in the sector, that the level of you know, because we're not a true profession, we sometimes get replaced by people who perhaps don't have the depth of knowledge. But that's just my usual rant on the subject.
No, it's really good. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, if it does need shaking up. If to come back to your point of size, that these mergers have made it bigger, there's more stock out there, and yet the staff turning levels haven't increased, so they've got more to manage there. So there is an issue with size, and I would love for it to go back to the more community based, where you have a housing officer that you deal with, and you know, and I think that would be good. I do think there's a problem with that. I mean, the housing officer that we had here, she was dealing with far too many, too wide a spread of homes that she couldn't keep up with it. And of course, the break in the change was that she would make the promises, but then they wouldn't be delivered by the maintenance team. So there is that problem.
And more than that, she will burn out. They will move on. Another person will come in who doesn't understand the stock, and the cycle continues.
Start again, yeah, and the burnout that happens. We've had the head of customer experiences has left, and they came from a retail background, retail and banking, and ended up then having to manage builders and maintenance guys, and couldn't do that part of it, couldn't fix that part of the puzzle. I think coming from a background where you've got say, for example, retail, your customers aren't guaranteed. There are other options for there. Within housing, we are stuck together. We are stuck within this relationship. So if I'm not happy with the service, I can't just go somewhere else. I do think there are a core group of staff who have chosen housing as a vocation, and they're brilliant and they need to be in there, but they need to be supported, and I'm not sure they get that support. I also think there's a lot of transferable skills that could come from outside the sector, which can help freshen it up and can help with this explosion of houses that we've had, and can help support with new ideas. And regards to tech, we need the tech, because it is no longer possible for someone to go round to every flat to check that their thermostats are at the right temperature, or that their gas oven is safe. And even simple things like, boiler maintenance, which you would think would be paramount. These services are being skipped, they're not being done properly, and this is a disaster waiting to happen. If there's something in there, built in there, which says it's due its service, it pings off, we need the Internet of Things, but we need that stuff. I'm sorry, I've ranted on.
No, that's all good. Judith, thank you for putting the chat there. And I guess it touched on the complaint side again. It's a question a certain number may have been dealt with, but in a certain amount of time. But is the complaint actually resolved? Many have a different story. Shared the link there for the housing can benefit from input from other sectors. It absolutely can. It's getting that balance right. Michelle Haycock's going to bring you in. Lovely to have you with us today, and then I'll go back to Nigel.
Hi, good morning, everybody. With this, there was just so many lenses to look through, isn't there? Back in the day, Ben, we was told not to communicate with shared owners, and we got the front forward basically saying we're not tenants, because that was the language that was being used. I do think there's some valid points about turnover of staff as well, because they are bombarded, and that community spirit, that sense of belonging has been lost. But also there's so much red tape, and this has all come from the governance, red tape, policies, procedures. And it takes so long to get through them. But also, even if you hit the housing ombudsman, you'll find that sometimes they'll throw back that complaint on the basis that the housing association or the local authority or the public sector have actually followed their policies and procedures. But it takes too long to question the things that we're doing. And is it of value, not only of money wise, but time? So we end up kind of doing too much to stop something that could be nipped in the bud quite quickly. And this thing about, you know, you mentioned it's hard to get through to customer services and the internet of all things. Sometimes you can't actually just get to speak to somebody on the phone. And it is this gatekeepers. So keep on hearing this word communication. What we should be entering into is a dialogue of listening and not just preempting what somebody is actually trying to say. I support what you're doing, Ben. You have opened up a can of worms. But as I said, there's so many different lenses to look through this. And I think sometimes it's lived experience. The one thing that we all need is a roof over our head. And I think that is sometimes lost in that communication, and we need to start engaging in dialogue. So
Michelle, thank you so much. No. And I think that piece you said there about knowledge is really key. And I think a lot of it comes back to stigma and comes back to, oh, it's a social housing property. Oh, it's going to be this, that, and the other. As I say, and I bang on about this a lot, social housing used to be something people wanted. It was like, great, I've got a social housing property. Now it's the complete opposite, and that's because they've been left to be fall into disrepair. And on the knowledge piece, and you mentioned about lived experience, what was really interesting, I put a poll on at the beginning of the year around, and it was a recruitment piece. As I say, I do recruitment. This is what I do. That's why I keep these free, and the only way these stay free is because so many of the people in this room and others use me for their recruitment, which is brilliant. But the question that came up over and over was that I said, what's important? Is it cost? Is it, you know, breadth of candidates? What is it? What is it? And the key thing that constantly came up was someone understanding the sector. And this is the problem you have with consultants. And I think it comes back to what Ben said about, you know, some of the tech issues and some of the tech companies. Social housing is a different world to other worlds. It just is in its very own capacity. And if you don't understand it, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes. Ben, I would come to you, but I've got Nigel the lens tenor. So Nigel, I'm going to bring you in.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to get back to Alison, but the word kind of lived experience has come up again. Yeah, the idea, of course, we've got the social housing panel now, which influences the government. I'm on that, but we cannot touch the policy. What we're trying to do collectively is ensure that it actually works on the ground. So the trouble we have, and it's with this conference again, which is actually all about the regulator. It calls itself a tenant and resident engagement, but it's the regulator pushing, doing the driving here. We are seen, and this is the difficulty we've got really, and Ben knows this, we are seen as confrontational. If we take hold of something like Ben's got this initiative, it's seen as confrontational rather than collaborative. And somehow, collectively, we've got everybody to convince that we're working together collaboratively, and this is the big issue. And I'm sure you've come across this, Ben. Well, you've been kicked off. I've been kicked off my resident exec committee because I'm seen as a disruptor. Somehow we've got to work out how it works for all of us, and I don't know how that's going to be done. But
and I think a lot of the time that comes from an initial frustration. Like originally you weren't a disruptor, you were an engager, and then the frustration from your side grew that change wasn't being made.
Absolutely.
Rather than working with someone, you move on. And that's what I mean by social housing not being like other sectors. Because if you have got, and Ben mentioned it before about choice, you know, it's not like you can just go, right, well, I'll just go move down there and they'll put me in a different, those choices aren't there in the same way. So
Yeah.
you kind of get stuck, and it's a real shame. And Sonora, I know you've not joined us on the chat today, so do come in, and I'm going to go back to Ben for thoughts on what's been said so far. Good to have you with us.
Oh, hi. I was just picking up on one of what your panel said about social housing, they're getting in employees who are not from social housing background in terms of training. As a student studying housing, I can say that when I finished my first degree and going for a job, I wasn't getting any, because according to them is that I don't have the experience, although I've studied housing to degree level and now studying to a postgraduate level, I'm still not getting a job because according to them, I don't have the experience. But then they would employ someone that don't have any housing related experience over someone like me. So I'm just wondering, is this the right field studying? Because, you know, employers are not employing me for some reason. Although I've noticed that a lot of universities were doing housing degrees, and they have all stopped in England because people are not going in that form of education because they're not getting the jobs. So this is something that probably they can, you know, look at and explore some more.
It's a big issue with professionalization. There needs to be, you know, like I said, there used to be qualifications and things that were really highly recognized. I think once you're in the sector and then you get your level 3, 5, 7 CIH, they're suddenly seen as these excellent things. But I agree, having a qualification to get into the sector, people would rather have experience, but you can't get that if you've gone down the degree route in the same way. I'm sorry you're going through those struggles. If I can help at all, please, let's have a chat. More than happy to, if I can open up some doors there to see how we can assist. So please just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. Ben, obviously on that and on some of the other points, a couple of points in the chat, and I'll come over to you, but Alison has said good, accessible, digital, essential for transactional issues. The more complex ones need a good officer on the ground, and I completely agree. Terry Ewers, who's one of my co-chairs of the Exempt Accommodation Forum in Birmingham. I'm aware of a housing association that's throwing money at tenants to stop complaints so they don't seem as bad as they are. They aren't rectifying the complaint. They're just trying to go, look, we'll give you some money, let it go. And Anna Henderson has had to go, but has really enjoyed the meeting. Carolyn Mann was recently told that tenants' expectations are too high. Surely it's the housing association's expectations are too low. As Michelle said earlier, it's a home. At what point is it you're allowed to have a low expectation of the home you live in? And Michelle's shared an article there, which is Leadership in Housing, a Looming Capability Gap. So worth a read. But Ben, over to you, some thoughts on what's been shared there and where we're going into the last 5 minutes. If there's any last comments as well, please do.
Okay, forgive me if I've missed anyone out. Red tape, absolutely far too much red tape. Communication between them, yes, it is difficult and it shouldn't be. If you're not going to honour a time frame, you need to let people know. If you're not going to turn up at their door to fix their plumbing, you need to let them know. It's simple customer service 101. This needs to happen. Communication as being part of a customer panel. Look, my grandma always told her, God bless her, that I had far too much mischief in my heart and I could find trouble in a monastery. And I could. So I'm a troublemaker. So I'm not surprised I got kicked off the customer panel. But we need troublemakers to sometimes get things up and running. Degree level and not able to get a job in housing, I think is deeply concerning. I don't know what positions you're applying for. But again, as Matt said, he's the man to support you with that one. I can't read my own handwriting. Sorry about that one. That one will go. Reputation management, throwing money at complaints. Absolutely. The sector is far too focused on reputation management. And that brings me back to that Ponzi scheme. They have to be able to be in a situation that they can build new homes. If they can't build new homes, they can't fix their dilapidated stock. This is why they're spending so much money on reputation. And this is why a review platform is going to be quite worrying to people. But if you're doing what you say you're doing, you're honouring timeframes, you're communicating with your customers, and there is a valid reasons. There will be many valid reasons why you couldn't turn up at Mrs. Smith's home to fix her leaking sink. There'll be many reasons, and they'll all be valid, as long as you make them aware and keep them on. So reputation management will come once you've got that in place. Expectations, yeah. I mean, I always say, look, it might be your stock, but it's my home. And as I've said to you, being a shared ownership, you know, you're actually reducing my pension fund, because when I sell this property, I want to go off and travel the world with the wife. I don't want to be, you know, having to not be able to sell it because it's not worth the money we paid because you've not fixed the lifts and, you know, we've got kids breaking in. So expectations are high. It's our home. It's where we educate our children. Underneath the roof will we feed and educate our children. How much more emotive can you get? And that's where I get a lot of residents who come through and they're really angry and they use the wrong terminology and they'll drop in the F-bomb and they'll call customer service names and then they'll get banned. They'll get put on communication bans, Twitter blocks, you know, and Green Square Court are still so far the only housing association that blocks people putting comments on Facebook. You know, why would you block that level of engagement when you're trying to pump up the voice of the customer? You might not like what the customer has to say. And I don't believe the customer is always right. In fact, I would say 50% of the time they're not. But you've got to listen, you've got to support, and you've got to nurture, and you've got to work with. Putting up barriers because you don't like the tone of the voice, you don't like what they're saying, or it's damaging your online reputation, is foolhardy. That's a fool's errand. And that's the main purpose of the housing sector website.
And Carolyn's backed you up there. She spends a lot of time coaching residents, put forward the best argument. And Alison has said, actually, it'd be interesting to compare size of complaints teams with the marketing teams. I think those could be a really, but Ben, there you go, you can add that to your list. And thank you for bringing an hour of time that's absolutely flown by again today. Val has backed that up, saying landlords can't improve if they don't listen. I think that's where we're getting to. I think we're in for really troublesome's maybe the wrong word, but difficult year for social housing this year. More stuff is slowly coming out of the woodwork all the time. People are finding out more about particularly what some of the larger providers have been missing. And so you talk about reputation management. I think those who are going to be honest is going to be the key moving forward. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. Thank you to everyone who could come today. Do reach out to me on LinkedIn if you would like to. If you're not already on the mailing list or anything, reach out to me, get involved. There is a second one this week because A, I'm a bit mad, and B, I didn't do one last week and I'm determined to get 50 done this year. So on Thursday, Vina Allison, who was recommended to me from Bromsgrove District Housing Trust, having done some work there, is really going to be discussing the employee experience. And in that, we're going to be discussing some of the stuff to do with burnout, lived experience, and some of the other things we've discussed today. You know, what is it that attracts people to the sector? Why have people been leaving the sector? And what do we need to be looking at to try and improve recruitment and retention moving forward? So look, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Ben, for bringing it to the table. Obviously, I'll share your details as well if anybody wants to get in touch with you. And the recording for this will go live before the end of the day. I'm just trying to get caught up on everything. But thanks everyone again. Really nice to see you all. And any final comments from you?
Just thank you everyone. It's been great, and please reach out to me, ben@housingsector.co.uk. It'd be great to hear from you. I'm doing this for lots of my neighbours, for lots of people, but you know, together we can help make this a much better experience for us all. So thank you, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Matt, you're doing a great job. Thank you, my brother from another mother. Stay strong. I'll see you soon.
Take care, everyone. Thanks again. Cheers, Ben. Thank you, everyone else. Bye-bye.